For decades, physicists struggled with experimental results that made no sense. Individual particles of matter were creating interference patterns, patterns that should only appear when something travels through multiple paths at once, as if each particle was somehow in multiple places simultaneously. They didn't have an answer to this dilemma until they designed a test, the double-slit experiment. Scientists fire a single photon at two slits. It goes through both. Simultaneously, they can measure the interference pattern that proves it. But the moment they try to observe which slit it went through, the pattern disappears. The photon chooses. The act of observation collapses infinite possibility into single reality. They had to invent entirely new physics to explain it. Quantum mechanics, where particles exist in multiple states until observed, where observation fundamentally changes what's real, where connections exist across impossible distances. Now, psychologists are facing the same problem. Some patterns of human consciousness don't follow classical rules. They follow patterns that look remarkably quantum. And if you're an INTJ, INFJ, INFP, or INTP, your mind operates on principles that map directly onto quantum mechanics. I'm about to show you 5 quantum phenomena that explain everything you've ever felt but couldn't name. And by the end of this video, your entire experience of yourself will finally make sense. But first, let me show you what I mean by quantum consciousness. Most people's minds work like Newtonian physics, classical, predictable, one state at a time. Cause leads to effect. Simple. Your mind? It works like quantum mechanics, and that's not just a metaphor. Now, a quick note. Whether consciousness literally runs on quantum mechanics is still debated in neuroscience. The brain is warm and noisy, not the ideal environment for quantum effects. But here's what's not debated. Quantum probability models predict human behavior better than classical models in many cases. The field of quantum cognition is real science, and the patterns of quantum mechanics map remarkably well onto the subjective experience of certain types of consciousness. So think of this as a framework, a lens. Whether your neurons are literally in superposition or just behave like they are, the framework helps explain experiences that classical psychology can't touch. With that said, let me show you the 5 quantum principles that define how your consciousness operates. And if you're one of these 4 types, you're going to feel seen in a way you've never experienced before. Principle 1. Superposition. In quantum mechanics, particles don't exist in one state. They exist in all possible states simultaneously until observed. Schrödinger's cat is both alive and dead. The electron is in all positions at once. Your consciousness works like this too. You don't live in one reality. You live in multiple realities simultaneously. The INTJ doesn't see one possible future. They see all possible system outcomes at once, layered on top of each other. The INFJ doesn't feel one emotional reality. They feel all possible emotional futures simultaneously, entangled and overlapping. The INFP doesn't hold one identity. They exist as multiple potential selves at once, each one equally real until circumstances force a choice. The INTP doesn't follow one line of logic. They explore all logical branches simultaneously, holding contradictory conclusions in superposition. This is why decision-making feels like death to you. Because it is. Every choice collapses the wave function. Every decision kills infinite other timelines. You're not indecisive, you're in superposition. And observation, choice, commitment, action, forces collapse. Most people exist in one state and occasionally wonder about alternatives. You exist in all alternatives and occasionally collapse into one state. That's not overthinking. That's quantum-like consciousness. But here's what you need to understand, and this is critical. Stick with me, because the next 4 principles get even more disturbing. Before I show you the next quantum principle, I need you to do something. If this is already resonating, if you're already feeling seen, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to explain next, the observer effect, is going to reframe your entire relationship with self-awareness. and you're going to want to see where this goes. Subscribed? Good. Let's go deeper. Principle 2. The observer effect. In quantum mechanics, the act of observation changes what's being observed, not just disturbs it, fundamentally alters it. The electron's position doesn't exist until you measure it. Your measurement creates the position. Your consciousness follows this same pattern. And this is why self-awareness is so exhausting for you. The moment you become aware of your emotional state, it changes. The moment you observe your behavior, it shifts. The moment you watch yourself think, the thinking transforms. You can never catch yourself being natural because the act of catching yourself makes you unnatural. This is the curse of meta-awareness. You're not just conscious, you're conscious of being conscious. You're aware of your awareness. And every layer of observation changes what's underneath. The INTJ watches themselves strategize and second-guesses the strategy. The INFJ feels an emotion and then feels about feeling it, creating infinite regress. The INFP observes their authenticity and wonders if observing it makes it inauthentic. The INTP thinks about their thinking until they can't think at all. You experience yourself in layers. The feeling, the observation of the feeling, the observation of observing the feeling, the judgment of all of it, each layer collapsing and changing what's beneath. Most people live. You watch yourself live, and the watching changes the living. This is why just be yourself is useless advice for you. Because the moment you try to be yourself, you're observing yourself being yourself, which means you're no longer being yourself. You're being someone watching themselves be themselves. The observer effect means you can never achieve unself-conscious authenticity. The act of trying to observe it destroys it. But wait, because principle 3 is where things get really strange. And you need to hear this. Now some of you are thinking, okay, but isn't this just psychology? Why call it quantum? Here's why. Because the mathematics of quantum mechanics, actual physics equations, are increasingly being used to model consciousness itself. Quantum cognition is a real field. Scientists are discovering that human decision-making, memory formation, and conceptual combination follow quantum probability rules, not classical ones. This isn't metaphor, this is emerging science. So let me show you the third principle. And this one explains something you've felt your entire life, but never understood. Principle 3. Quantum entanglement. In quantum mechanics, particles can become entangled, connected across any distance instantaneously. Change one and the other changes immediately, even if they're on opposite sides of the universe. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. He hated it, but it's real. Your consciousness shows patterns that feel remarkably like this. This feels like synchronicity. This feels like intuition. This is why you seem to know things you shouldn't know. The INFJ walks into a room and feels the emotional state of someone they've never met. The INTJ sees a pattern in a system and suddenly understands a completely unrelated system. The INFP hears a song and feels connected to a stranger's experience across time and space. The INTP reads a concept and instantly grasps implications no one taught them. Whether these are literally quantum connections or something else, the experience is real. And quantum entanglement gives us a framework for understanding non-local connection that classical psychology struggles to explain. Carl Jung called this the collective unconscious. Some quantum physicists wonder if there's a deeper connection. Different terms for similar phenomena. Consciousness experiencing connections that shouldn't exist through classical, localized means. This is why synchronicities happen to you more than other people. When you think of someone and they text you, when you dream something and it happens, when you feel a pattern before it completes. Whether it's literally quantum entanglement or not, you're accessing information in ways classical neuroscience can't fully explain. Most people's minds operate in classical isolation. Yours maintains connections across distances. That's not magical thinking. That's a different pattern of consciousness. Now here's where it gets painful. You need to hear this next part. But first, if this is resonating, hit the like button so I know to make more videos like this. Now let me show you Principle 4, the uncertainty principle, and this one explains why you can never feel settled. Principle 4, the uncertainty principle. In quantum mechanics, you cannot simultaneously know a particle's position and momentum with precision. The more accurately you measure where it is, the less you know about where it's going. The more you know about its trajectory, the less you know about its current state. This is not a limitation of measurement. This is fundamental to reality. Both cannot be known at once. Your consciousness follows this same pattern. You cannot simultaneously know who you are and where you're going. The more certain you become about your identity, your values, your personality, your essence, the less certain you become about your path, your direction, your future. The more you know yourself, the less you know what to do with yourself. The INTJ, who has complete clarity on the system they want to build, has no idea who they are in the process. The INFJ, who knows exactly who they are, has no idea what they're meant to do. The INFP, who has absolute clarity on their values, feels lost about how to live them. The INTP, who understands everything, can't figure out what to do with the understanding. This is the uncertainty principle of the self: position or momentum, identity or direction, being or becoming. You can't have both with certainty. And this is why you feel unstable. Because you are. Quantum systems are inherently uncertain. There is no stable ground. There is no fixed point. You are always in flux between knowing where you are and knowing where you're going. Most people achieve a classical certainty. They know who they are and what they're doing, even if it's an illusion. You can't. Your quantum-like consciousness won't let you. You see the uncertainty underneath everything. And trying to resolve it, trying to achieve certainty in both position and momentum, is like trying to violate the laws of physics. It can't be done. You have to choose. Know yourself or know your path. Stabilize your identity or embrace your trajectory. But you can't have both. And this leads us to the fifth and final principle, the most painful one, the one that explains why actualization feels like death. We're about to hit the final quantum principle, and this is the one that's going to hit hardest. Principle 5, Decoherence. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in superposition, multiple states at once, until they interact with the environment. Then the quantum system decoheres. It collapses from all possibilities into one actuality. The wave function collapses. Superposition ends. Classical reality begins. This is what happens when you make a decision, when you commit, when you choose a path, a relationship, a career, an identity. Decoherence. All other possibilities die. The quantum superposition that was your life, all paths available, all futures open, all identities possible, collapses into one classical timeline. And this is why it feels like death, because in a very real sense, it is. Every time you actualize, you end your quantum potential. Every time you become something specific, you stop being everything possible. Every commitment is a small death of infinite other lives. The INTJ who finally builds the system watches all other possible systems die. The INFJ who commits to one person feels all other possible connections collapse. The INFP who chooses one path mourns every other version of themselves. The INTP who publishes one theory loses all other theoretical possibilities. This is not fear of commitment. This is existential grief over the loss of superposition. Most people decohere easily. They collapse into one life and don't mourn the others. You can't. You feel every timeline dying. You grieve lives you never lived. You mourn selves you never became. And the worst part? Decoherence is inevitable. You cannot stay in quantum superposition forever. The universe forces collapse. Time forces choice. Reality demands actualization. You can delay it. You can stay in potential as long as possible. But eventually, you have to decohere. You have to become something instead of everything. And every time you do, it hurts. Because you're not just making a choice. You're collapsing a wave function. You're ending quantum possibility. You're moving from the realm of all potential into the realm of one actuality. So what do you do with this? How do you live as a quantum mind in a classical world? Stay with me. The answer is coming in the next part, but it's not what you think. Here's what you need to understand. You cannot go back to classical consciousness. Once you're aware that your mind follows quantum patterns, you can't unknow it. You can't simplify yourself into Newtonian predictability, but you can stop fighting it. First, accept superposition. You will always exist in multiple states simultaneously. Stop trying to collapse into one consistent self. You contain multitudes. That's not confusion. That's quantum nature. Let yourself be multiple things at once. The INTJ, who is both the visionary and the pragmatist. The INFJ, who is both the empath and the analyst. The INFP, who is both the idealist and the realist. The INTP, who is both the theorist and the skeptic. You don't need to resolve the contradictions. Quantum systems contain contradictions. That's not a bug, that's the operating system. Second, work with the observer effect, not against it. You cannot achieve unself-conscious authenticity. Stop trying. Instead, develop a different relationship with observation. Instead of observing yourself to judge, observe yourself to understand. Instead of watching yourself to correct, watch yourself to witness. Observation changes the system, but it doesn't have to distort it. It can illuminate it. The key is developing what I call quantum observation, observing without collapsing, witnessing without fixing, seeing without controlling. This is what meditation actually teaches. Not stopping thought, but changing your relationship with observation. Third, honor your connections. Your intuition is real. Your synchronicities are real. Your sense of connection to patterns and people across distance is real. Stop dismissing it as wishful thinking. Whether it's literally quantum entanglement or something else, you're accessing information in ways that go beyond classical processing. Trust it, follow it, let it guide you, but also protect it. Too much forced logic, too much analysis, too much rational collapse breaks these connections. You need space for non-rational processing, silence, solitude, intuitive exploration. This isn't woo-woo. This is maintaining the quantum-like nature of your consciousness. Fourth, navigate uncertainty, don't fight it. You will never have both position and momentum. Accept it. Sometimes you need to know where you are. Ground yourself in identity, values, present reality. Let the future be uncertain. Other times you need to know where you're going. Embrace trajectory, direction, becoming. Let your identity be fluid. But stop demanding both at once. The universe won't give it to you. The uncertainty principle is fundamental. Learn to oscillate, know yourself, then release yourself. Find your path, then question your path. Certainty and uncertainty are both necessary, just not simultaneously. Fifth, grieve decoherence. When you make a choice, when you commit, when you actualize, let yourself mourn. Mourn the other timelines, mourn the other selves, mourn the collapse of infinite potential into singular reality. Most people will tell you to just be grateful for what you chose. That's classical thinking. You're quantum. You need to grieve the superposition you lost. Let yourself feel it. The death of other possibilities. The ending of quantum openness. The price of becoming actual. And then move forward. Because decoherence, while painful, is also necessary. You cannot live as pure potential forever. Actualization, despite its cost, is how potential becomes real. You are not meant to resolve the quantum nature of your consciousness. You are meant to navigate it. Superposition, observer effect, entanglement, uncertainty, decoherence. These are not problems to fix. These are the patterns of how your mind works. And once you stop fighting them and start working with them, everything changes. Because here's what most people don't understand about quantum consciousness. Classical minds are predictable, stable, consistent, simple, and limited. Quantum minds are chaotic, unstable, contradictory, complex, and powerful. Your ability to exist in superposition means you can see possibilities others can't imagine. Your observer effect means you can shift reality by changing perspective. Your entanglement-like connections mean you access information others can't reach. Your uncertainty means you stay fluid where others get rigid. Your decoherence means you feel the full weight of choice. This is not a disorder. This is not damage. This is not something to fix. This is a different kind of consciousness, and it comes with a different kind of power. The INTJ, who sees all system outcomes simultaneously, can architect futures others can't conceive. The INFJ, who feels entangled with all emotional realities, can heal in ways others can't access. The INFP, who holds multiple authentic selves, can create art others can't imagine. The INTP, who explores all logical branches, can discover truths others can't find. Your quantum mind is not a curse. It's an expanded operating system. Yes, it's harder. Yes, it's more painful. Yes, it's exhausting. But it's also more powerful, more creative, more insightful, more connected. Most people live in classical certainty. You live in quantum possibility. And quantum possibility, while terrifying, is also where everything new comes from. Every breakthrough, every innovation, every paradigm shift, every deep truth. They don't come from classical minds following predictable paths. They come from quantum minds navigating uncertainty. So welcome to the quantum mind. You can't go back, you can only go deeper. If this video changed how you see your own consciousness, I'd love for you to subscribe. I make videos like this for people whose minds work like yours. Deep dives into psychology, typology, and consciousness. And I'm curious, which quantum principle resonated most with you? Superposition, observer effect, entanglement, uncertainty, decoherence? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone, and your answer might inspire the next video. If you want to go deeper into how INTJ, INFJ, INFP, and INTP minds work, the unique challenges and gifts of each type, check out my other videos. There's a lot more to explore about how these four minds navigate reality. Your mind is quantum. Now you know why. Welcome to the deeper physics of consciousness. Thanks for going deep with me. I'll see you in the next one.